Hello, my name is Kina Gose. I'm a traditional artist who specializes in drawing realism with colored pencil, and today I'm going to show you how I drew this realistic eye using Prismacolor colored pencils and markers. I began this sketch by using a mechanical pencil to sketch out the basic elements of the eye. All the while, I try to make sure that I'm not applying too much pressure on the graphite because I want to erase it later. I use a kneaded eraser to erase the graphite lines and go over them with Prismacolor Colorase colored pencils. I erase the graphite because graphite doesn't mix well with colored pencil pigment, and because I still would like to see an outline of my sketch, which is why I colored back in using Colorase pencils. Using the Prismacolor dual-ended art markers, I'm going to block out the basic colors of the pupil, the iris, the highlighted area, the tear duct, and the white of the eye. You want to begin by layering in your lighter colors to establish your values, and then gradually blending and layering in your darker colors to add contrast. I try not to get too caught up in all the little details when I'm coloring in with the marker because I know that later on I'm going to be going over this with colored pencil. An important thing to note when working with markers is that the colors tend to blend better with one another when they are wet, which is why it's important to work rather quickly when you are blending a variety of colors in your piece. And as you can see in the tear duct and in the white of the eye area, I do have several colors that I am blending together, so on those areas I am trying to work rather quickly so that those colors will blend together better. When I am satisfied with my marker base, I go over top with the colored pencils. I begin by blocking out the darkest areas of the eye, so in that case, that being the pupil and the very corners of the eye. And then as you can see, I start to move on to the other parts of the iris by adding in those base colors. It's important to note that while you are working, you want to maintain sharp pencils, and you want to be light with your pressure on top of the pencils, because when using Prismacolor pencils, since they are wax-based, there is only a certain amount of pigment you can apply to the paper before you get too much wax buildup, and it's very hard to layer more colors. Because of this, I recommend maintaining a light hand when applying the pressure of your pencils on the paper. The iris of the eye that I'm drawing is very colorful, so I want to make sure I am replicating those colors as best I can by using a wide variety of colors of colored pencils when I'm coloring in the iris. I then move on to the white of the eye by starting to lightly shade in colors on the edges of the iris. I try to create a sort of blur around the iris, and this helps it to blend in more with the environment and look more a part of the white of the eye. As I move on to more of the white of the eye and the tear duct, you'll notice I will use a wide variety of colors. This is because the white of the eye is never truly just white. It reflects a lot of shadows and lights, a lot of the environment, and in itself contains a lot of veins. Although it may be tempting to think to use grays and blacks to color in shadows, I try to stick to more natural colors. The reason being that grays and blacks tend to give more of a harsh shadow, and they also tend to muddy the other colors that they are blended with. As I finish off the white of the eye by adding veins and highlights in the tear duct, I move on to the skin by using markers and applying lighter colors in the highlighted areas and darker colors in the shadows. In the areas where the lights and darks meet, I use a mid-tone to blend them together. When I am satisfied with the marker base over top the skin, I begin by lightly layering the colored pencil over top. I begin by layering light to dark, and I move my pencil in circular motions to mimic the smooth appearance of skin. It's at this point that I will also begin work on the eyelashes by first using a dark colored pencil to map them out before filling them in with a black colored pencil. To achieve sharp, dark, and thick lines for your eyelashes, it's important to maintain a sharp point for your black pencil, which may mean you may need to sharpen it often. You will also notice that I will work on the eyelashes as I am working on the skin, rather than first completing the skin and then working on the eyelashes. The reason for this is that I don't want to try to layer eyelashes over top an area of already completed skin where there is a lot of wax buildup, because it's going to be a lot more difficult to get the color and pigment down. I will then go in with the marker one last time to color in the rest of the areas of the skin. And this is where the chisel nib of the Prismacolor dual-ended art markers come in handy to get a lot of surface area when coloring in skin. I will often use markers as a base for when coloring with colored pencil because it can tend to save a lot of time, and it can be very helpful for mapping out your piece, especially if there are certain areas where you want lights or darks or other colors to be. As I continue to develop the eyelashes, I use other colors from the skin to color in around the eyelashes to blend them in with the skin. This can be a really helpful technique to smooth out the edges of the eyelashes, because when you use a black pencil to color them in, they can have a harsh look to them, but by using other colors of the skin to smooth them out, it helps make them look more as part of the environment of the skin. There are quite a few shadows in areas of this piece, and you may notice that I haven't really used any grays in those shadows. I've actually used a lot of purple. I've replaced the grays in the shadowed areas with purples, pinks, oranges, and even some browns, because if I were to use gray and black in those areas, that would muddy the natural tone of skin that I want in this piece. As I begin adding the lashes in the lower part of the eye, again, I'm going to use a dark colored pencil. In this case, I'm using a dark purplish pink to map out the eyelashes before I fill them in with black. I'm drawing my eyelashes in this way because since I'm still working on skin, I don't want to lay down the black quite yet because I don't want to risk muddying the black in with the skin tones. As I near the end of the piece, I continue to build contrast in certain areas and blend and add details as I see necessary. As I start to wrap up the skin, I finish by taking a white colored pencil that is sharpened, and in certain areas I will apply pressure in circular motions to create more highlights and textures. This is a very useful technique that I use to create smooth and realistic skin. At this point, I'm adding just a few last minute details, but the piece is pretty much finished. I hope you guys enjoyed this video and that you learned some useful techniques and tricks to use when drawing with colored pencil and markers. Prismacolor markers and colored pencils are by far my favorite materials to use when drawing realism, and I specifically really enjoyed using them in this piece. Thank you again for watching, and I hope this inspired you to get creative with your drawing.